you so much for joining me on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. I'm your host, David Matters, and I'm here to bring you stories, interviews, and insights relating to the topics of creativity, inspiration, and practice. My intention is to connect with other people who employ a heart-centered approach to the artistic process and to share this profoundly inspiring content with anyone who cares to hear it. I hope you enjoy. This is a dream, and dream is never the same. My guest this week was Chris Grosso. Chris is a youth mental health and healing group facilitator with Newport Academy, public speaker, writer, and author of Indie Spiritualist, Everything Mind, and his newest book, Dead Set on Living. He writes for Origin Magazine, Huffington Post, and Mantra Yoga, plus Health Magazine, and has spoken and performed at Wanderlust, Celebrate Your Life, Yoga Journal Conference, Sedona World Wisdom Days, Sun Valley Wellness Festival, and more. Chris is passionate about his work with people who are in the process of healing or struggling with addictions of all kinds. He speaks and leads groups in detoxes, yoga studios, rehabs, youth centers, hospitals, conferences, and festivals worldwide. He is a member of the advisory board for Drugs Over Dinner, hosts the Indie Spiritualist Podcast on Ram Dass' esteemed Be Here Now network, and is a member of the Evolutionary Leaders. And there's a lot more I could have read too. Chris has got all kinds of good stuff going on, and this interview, as they keep on happening to be, is fantastic. I did this recording while I was visiting family up in Pennsylvania. My dad was getting remarried, and unfortunately, I was recording in the only spot that I could find in my brother's house, and there was all kinds of madness going on. Dogs barking, people mowing their lawns. My daughter walks in on one part, and you can hear her talking, so I apologize for all that madness. It is what it is. That's the beauty of these podcasts, is they're raw and they're real, and you got to stick it out. Chris has all kinds of great insights. He's such a humble and just solid guy. Everything that he speaks comes right from the heart. You can tell he's very passionate about what he does, and he's a pretty well-rounded guy too. So we go into writing, and we go into addiction recovery, and we go into the creative process, and he touch on music and all kinds of good stuff. And we dig into some of his books, his new book especially. We kind of talk about what's going on with that, and all his work he does with the podcast too, because that's how I know about Chris, is reading his books and listening to his podcast, the Indie Spiritualist Podcast. And I was like, man, this guy's he's just such a good dude, and he's got roots in creativity as well as spiritual practice with meditation and different things that he does with all kinds of great teachers. So yeah, please stick it out. Forgive the madness of the surroundings, but it was either that or nothing at all. So I hope you guys will listen through it. There's a lot of really good stuff we touch on. And yeah, as always, I'll have the links up online there, so you guys can check that out and have a connection to all his work and his books and everything, and follow him on Facebook and Instagram and all that. Check out my work at creativeawakeningnow.com. Check out my blog. I took 2 weeks off while I was traveling with the blog. I needed some space with it all going on and all kinds of craziness. So getting back to that this week. Sign up for the mailing list, and you can get my free ebook and get the blog stuff to your inbox every week. And yeah, check out my music for my band Life Like Water, and see all the stuff that we got going on, and stay in touch and check it out, because I got a bunch of guests coming up that are really awesome, and getting a lot of good stuff together with what I'm doing. I'm trying to put together some workshops even in the line of creativity and spiritual practice or awakening, and it'll be local stuff for sure in the Nashville area when I do get it together, but I'll be sharing that when I get it together. So in the weeks and months to come, hopefully I can have some stuff out there. But yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to check this out, and I hope you enjoy. We'll see you next time. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thank you, Chris, for being here with me today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. Well, I like to just launch right into these things, and you have done all kinds of great stuff. From you've published 3 books now. You've written for all kinds of magazines. You've worked with addiction recovery, and you've worked with great people on your podcast, and you're a part of the Be Here Now network and all that. And basically my approach with this whole thing is just digging into the creative process. And I'd love to talk about, especially with writing. I really enjoy your style and your approach with writing. It's very, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but it's very raw, it's very real, and it's the kind of stuff about transformation and spiritual work that is really rootsy. It's easy for people to grasp and to connect with. So maybe if you could talk about that process, especially in regards to your new book, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I dig that. Thanks, man. It's something I don't think I've really talked about much on podcasts. So,
oh, cool.
Thanks for asking that, David. So, when I look at writing, my girlfriend always jokes with me because she's been to a number of my talks or workshops, and I didn't catch myself doing this, but I guess I have a habit of saying I'm not a writer, I'm an experience sharer. And so out of nowhere, we'll just be hanging out, and she cracks on me all the time. We have a very playful relationship, and she'll be like, I'm not Chris Grosso, or I'm Chris Grosso. I'm not a writer, I'm an experience sharer. No,
yeah.
Shut up. But so I say that because it's weird for me. I didn't go to school for writing. I never took a course on writing. The first book I read about writing wasn't until last year, after I'd finished writing my third book, even though it wasn't published. But it was Stephen King's On Writing, which was just a tremendous book. It had a lot of really neat, simple tips for writers, but it was very fascinating because it was also part memoir, and it talked a lot about he wrote Cujo when he was blackout drunk, doesn't even remember writing it. He's a recovering alcoholic now, many years sober, but a lot of his earlier stuff, he was just a mess. And so it's really fascinating. But anyways, I share that because, so I'm not I guess for lack of a better word, a formally trained writer. It was not something I envisioned my life's trajectory, going in that direction. It basically literally fell in my lap. So, the interesting thing about it in regards to creativity is I liken writing to playing music. I'm also a musician. I never took lessons. I'm self-taught on bass, guitar, and drums, and I've played in bands, and I'm not great, but I also can hold my own. I've been in plenty of bands where we've recorded, and I've toured all over and had some really amazing experiences. But I also realized, now I kind of wish I did take lessons, because I hit this wall where I admittedly don't practice as much as I should. I just kind of play music and have fun with it. But had I taken lessons and really studied the craft, I know I would have been a much better musician. And same with writing. So I think with writing, what I lack for in that professional kind of training or study, I make up for in that raw authenticity, which you said. Something that unfortunately still is really lacking in a lot of spiritual writing. I think the tide is starting to shift with that, and I've been noticing more writers that are speaking an honest truth with integrity behind the message, rather than writing to sell a ton of books and become famous. That still happens too quite a bit, but so that's a little bit about the writing. But the creative process itself, I don't have a formula. I'm not like most writers where it's I have to write every day, because I don't. Going back to the music thing again, I learned the very hard way when I was playing guitar in many bands. If I was forcing myself to write a song, I would just get very frustrated. And there were times where I broke a guitar. I was so frustrated.
Yeah.
Now, this is way pre-meditation and all that good stuff, angsty teen. But I watched that similar experience happen with me in regards to writing. There were times where I'd get so frustrated I'd want to throw my computer at the wall or out the window. It's I can't, nothing's coming. So today, and for years now, I don't ever force myself to write. I don't ever force myself to play guitar or drums or whatever. If I feel inspired to do it, then I do it, and that's where I find it flows naturally.
Yeah.
And I haven't written anything. It's probably been about 8 months since I've written anything. After Dead Set on Living, I finished that about 8 months ago. It just came out maybe 3-4 months ago, something like that. But that book took it out of me. It drained me, and I have not written an article. I have not. Literally nothing. I've been busy with talks and workshops and stuff, which is great. And that almost in a way is a form of writing. That's how I write. It's whatever comes up, comes out. So whether I'm doing it like this in this interview, or sitting down on my Word document typing, it's kind of similar. But I just haven't felt inspired to sit down and write. And I'll never forget, I gave a talk to my old high school, which was really weird, a couple of years ago, about recovery and my journey, and I hated, if anyone who's read my first book knows, I hated my high school. Growing up in a small town, being into punk rock, hardcore, skateboarding, hip-hop, where it was very small, predominantly athletic fueled, and nothing wrong with that, but if you weren't an athlete, like, you were automatically, or like a smart kid or a band member, you were a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And I was a troublemaker, but always, also getting blamed for things I wasn't responsible for. But anyway, so they invited me back. It was like almost 20 years to the day after I graduated. So it was a very healing and cathartic experience for me to speak, to see how much that school has changed since I was there. And that was great. And there were even still a few teachers there that apologized to me for the way they treated me and my friends. Like, we didn't understand. This is back in the early 90s. They didn't understand piercings and skateboarding, and not that it's an excuse, but they were grateful that we helped show them, or start to open their eyes to different things outside of just sports. And I share that because after the talk, I went into a couple of the writing groups or writing classes and did some Q&A with them. And I'll never forget telling one of the students who asked about my creative process, similar to you, I said to them, just like I said, I never force myself to write. I feel inauthentic when I do that. I don't feel like I'm being true to whatever words would come out if I'm forcing it. And I saw the look on the teacher's face. She was mortified, because if writers write every day, no matter what, 1,000, 5,000 words, whatever. And so I had to quickly catch myself and be like, but you're in high school. So if you have an assignment to write every day, you have to write every day, so it's not until you're writing for yourself. But yeah, so I mean, that's it. Sorry if that was a little rambly, but all that to say, to come right back to your question, that's my creative process. I just listen and I get quiet, and when I feel moved to write or pick up my guitar or whatever it is I might be creating, I do it. And if I don't feel inspired to do that, I'll do something else. That maybe isn't necessarily creative, but I enjoy.
Yeah. No, that's. I think it's important, and I always have this conversation come up in these podcasts where it's like, everybody has their process with whatever it is, and especially with you, you do a lot of different things. It's not just one focused source of creativity and an outlet for it. And the process, whatever the process is important. Like, if your process is writing a whole bunch and then letting go and giving it space, I think that's just as important. And I have the exact same kind of experience a lot of time with music and with writing and all these different things. Like, I'll write a ton of stuff, I'll play a bunch of music, and then I just won't feel it, and I don't want to force it. But the one thing that I generally do is I'll put something in place of that. And usually for me it's meditation, and I have a daily practice of that. And I know that you also have a background in this to a degree, where you can like you said, you get still, you get silent, and you allow this stuff to come up. And that is just as much of a practice, I think. It's just as much connected to those things. And I would love if you would maybe kind of talk about that a little bit with your, not necessarily just meditation, but the spiritual side of the whole thing. That's what Creative Awakening is about. It's like there's this transformational experience that happens when you really put yourself into the creative process. And especially with your recovery, most of your stuff is about recovery and dealing with that and coming through the other side of that. So maybe you can make that connection a little bit in your own words.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, meditation is so huge for me. And I mean, there's as many types of meditation as there are friggin' people in the world almost. There's just so much, so many different kinds and variations, and that's awesome. So whenever people ask me about meditation, what do you recommend? Not that that's what you asked. It's just or if they say I'm too busy, it's like, no, you're not. Or, wake up 5 minutes earlier. Find a practice that works for you, that centers you, grounds you, brings you back into yourself. So for me, it's just pretty straightforward vipassana, just sitting there, breathing, being aware in the moment. But what I love about that is when I get up, and I don't always sit on a zafu, I might sit in my bed and meditate, I might sit on my couch and meditate. But when I get up after having that formal practice, whether it's 20, 40 minutes, whatever the day allows for me, once, twice a day, I don't leave it on the cushion or wherever I'm sitting formally. It comes out with me into my daily life. And it's not like I'm always in the present moment or anything, but it makes me much more present throughout the day. And I catch myself when I'm wandering in thoughts. And it just, I love Sharon Salzberg said something to the effect of, every time you become aware that you're lost in thought, and you come back, that's just a brief moment of enlightenment, because in that moment there's nothing except that perfect awareness, and you come right back. And I love that, because people always, not everyone, I'll speak for myself, I used to get so down on myself, you can't even meditate well, look at you're lost in thought, you just sat here for 20 minutes and maybe half of a minute, 30 seconds was calm, but that's the process, So the reason I share that about going into my day is the first two books were written predominantly while I was out running. So what I mean by that is, so I love to jog. That's a big part of my well-being. And usually I find I'll go for 8 to 12 mile runs when I'm in my prime running. I don't try to push it more than that. But usually once I hit 4 to 5 miles, something about that, my mind clears. It just empties out. And just these ideas come to me. And so I can't tell you how many times during the course of writing those two books, I went out for a run without an intention of writing anything, okay, I need to come up with something. I'm going for a run. That's it. If something comes up, great. If something doesn't, I get a great run in and I feel good. So there were so many times I would get home and be sweating and just quickly go to my computer, dripping sweat, typing on my Word document. And a couple of months ago, I was sharing a little bit about that in a workshop, and somebody was like, haven't you heard of a voice recorder? And I'm like, shut up. It didn't dawn on me then, and there's something different about actually writing the words versus talking into a recorder.
Yeah.
But so, like you said, that spirituality, for me, at least in my life, is the complete foundation upon which any creativity is born, or comes through me, is having that connection to that which is greater than my small egoic Chris Grosso self, 'cause I do believe we all have that. We're all forged from that, and we are all that. It is in us. In Buddhism, they talk about the two truths. One that is relative reality, which is everything that takes form, and one that is ultimate reality, that which all form arises from. And so, even though it's arisen, it's like that. A lot of spiritual teachers liken it to the wave rising from the ocean. It is its own wave, but it's not separate from the ocean. And that's how I truly see not just other people, but literally all things that have form, whether it's another being, animal, the computers we're using, a pillow, that guitar there, whatever, the TV. I'm just looking around my room, and it's all forged from this same kind of quantum soup of pure potentiality before it takes form, and it goes from waves to particles, and then and when the causes and conditions are right, we or things are made and created, and then when the causes and conditions no longer are right, we no longer are. And so I'm kind of straying a little off topic there, but even that helps me with my creativity. I wrote about in my second book how while out running, I'll see things like houses and not just see a house, but see deeper than that, and the interconnectivity of that house, and how it's not just a house, it's wood and nails and windows and glass, and kind of take it all apart in my mind and see how it all comes together to create a house. So it's a house, but it's also each part that creates the house. And that to me is looking deeper. And anytime we're looking deeper, it's a creative form of looking, I think. And that for me is a huge part of what really sparks my own expression of creativity in my life.
Totally.
So yay, meditation. Thank you, meditation, for helping me to see deeper and look deeper and have those experiences.
Yeah, I think that's anyone who's been involved with creative practices, and especially connected with whatever. Everyone's got a process, whether it's meditation or yoga or it's exercise or, we naturally are drawn to things that inspire us and make us feel good. And those two things are intimately connected in a way that I always try and make the connection on my show where it's like, is the product a result of the inspiration or is the inspiration a result of the product? It's like when you create something, it also inspires you to continue creating, and sometimes that's really where the spark is. It's just having, that's why I practice, having a practice where you can continually go along with that. And I think, if you're down to talk about what's in your new book, because I've read your first two books, and just as a side note, actually, so your Everything Mind was your last book, right?
Before the New One, my second book.
Yeah.
Mind, yep.
I really liked how that, like I said, the connection with substance abuse it's prevalent in my life. I haven't personally had to deal with addiction, but I've had substance abuse issues over the years. I traveled a lot, and just connecting with people in a very honest way about addiction and about recovery and stuff is so beautiful and so helpful. And when you come at it in an artistic way and you're very raw with it, it's easier to make the connection in your personal life. And with that book, I read it, and my best friend is actually in jail currently. I just went and visited him yesterday in jail because I'm in Pennsylvania. And he's dealt with substance abuse issues for a long time. And I went to bring him that book, actually. Unfortunately, I couldn't give it to him there. I have to send it through the mail, but we've been talking about it. I've been trying to show him creativity there's so much more with recovery. There's so much more outside of just AA and the basic routine of things. A lot of people are doing a lot of cool things to address those issues. And I feel like what you're doing is a creative act, sharing through writing, sharing through your podcast, sharing through speaking, all these things. That's what drew me to your work. It wasn't even because I was an addict. I just appreciate it because I've been around it so much. So maybe if you'd be willing to talk about that and how that relates to your work. I haven't read your new book yet, unfortunately, so I don't know if it's involved in that so much, but
that's it. Podcast over. We're done.
Yeah.
No, man, thank you for asking that. And, it's really cool. A lot of people that are not in recovery really connect with my work. And that tells me I'm getting the point across in a way that I'm hoping to. Because often when I talk about addiction recovery, I'm just referencing my own experience. But what I try to make clear in the outset of all of my books is that even though I'm speaking specifically throughout them towards my own experience with addiction recovery, I invite the readers, or if I'm doing a workshop or speaking at a conference, whatever, to use that and just change the word addiction, or drugs and alcohol with whatever it is that you might be struggling with in your own life, because we all have stuff we're going through. So, especially in the new book, that is a book that the main question that is explored is, why do we turn to these self-defeating behaviors? Or if we've even had time away from them, not just drugs or alcohol, literally anything from internet addiction to gambling to overeating to empty sex. I mean, on and on and on. If we're aware of this and we've had time away from it and we're doing better, why do we tend to go back to that? What happens there?
Yeah.
But most importantly, how do we really begin to change that in a long-lasting way? And that's the whole purpose. What I want to do, and my passion is meeting people wherever they're at on their healing journey, not just addiction and recovery, on their healing journey.
Yeah.
Because it's very unique for all of us. It's totally different. So, it's, and I'm sorry that your friend couldn't receive the book. I've heard a lot of people that have tried to do similar, and then you have to either send it or have Amazon send it, because I think in some cases they have to rip the cover off or something. But it's really touching to me when I get that correspondence from people. And, hello.
Sorry.
Oh, hi.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. She just...
really cute. No, she's so cute. There's a really cute girl looking.
Yeah. This is my daughter.
My girlfriend's listening. No, it's a little one. That's your daughter?
Yeah, it's my daughter, Zara. Like I said, I'm up with my brother's house, so I didn't have anywhere to put her. She's chilling out, but...
She's super cutie.
But I downstairs. I'll be right with you, okay? I'll be right there.
No, my movie had something wrong with it.
Give me a minute. Okay. Sorry, bro.
But sweet. No apologies. I love kids. Spent many years working with them. Adore children.
Awesome. I'm sorry. Yeah, keep going with that. I definitely, I love all that. That's why your work is so interesting for me because of connecting with it. You don't have to be an addict. Like addiction is a major issue for a lot of situations.
Yeah, and so in the new book, in the second chapter, Gabor Mate, I have a conversation with him, and he's one of the most world-renowned addiction experts. He's out of Vancouver. He's written a lot of wonderful books, but the one that for me has just been a game changer is it's called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And so I talked to him, and that conversation is in the book, and I really loved his definition of addiction. And I don't remember verbatim, but it's something to the effect of any behavior, substance related or not. So that right there is key, substance related or not, that you find temporary pleasure in, but results in some form of negative consequence, and we continue to do it. So right there, that is a much broader picture of addiction. Whereas most people hear that word and they think of, a drunk in the gutter or a heroin addict under a bridge or whatever. It's so much more than that. So, along with that, recovery, like you were saying, talking to your friend, for me and most people I know, when they take it seriously and whatever that looks like, whether it is traditional 12 steps or refuge recovery or yoga, meditation, or any combination thereof, therapy, I don't advocate for one or the other. Find what works for you, and God bless. That's all that matters. But no, it's like, for me, the creativity just gets stronger because it's more pure. It's not coming from this place of like half in the bag. And not to say you can't be creative, because like my favorite writers are like Bukowski, these complete madmen who were always like on something, and I love them. I can read them all day long and not get bored. But you don't have to do that. I'll share with you real quick. It made me think of, I'm just pulling it up. So, the Misfits guitarist, AC Slade, really wonderful dude. He posted a video. It was so cool. Like, I didn't even realize he posted it. But he's been following me for a while on Instagram, and I love Misfits too. So he made a post earlier today. Oh, anyways, well, first he posted his suitcase, because he's sober, 20 years sober, and very healthy, and he's over in Japan, and he posted a short video of his suitcase, and one of my friends tagged me in that video because it was showing like his Misfits clothes and a bunch of coffee, but my new book was in his suitcase, and I'm like, holy shit. Sorry, we can swear, but
it's all good.
Misfits, I love Misfits, so that was a wow moment for me. But so anyways, he wrote this really awesome post today on Instagram. It's just a picture of him. I'm looking at it right now, sitting on a balcony. I'll read it real quick. I think this sums up, speaking to the creativity of sober life.
Yeah.
He wrote, feeling even more grateful today than usual. When you live your life, here we go, as a creative / free-spirited person, you don't think about things like retirement. It's not like your record company says, hey kid, we're setting you up with a 401k. Usually we creative types reinvest any earnings back into other money hemorrhaging adventures, and you think of death as your only retirement plan. Absolutely. So to be 20 years sober, creatively on fire, and the opportunity to have a vacation / retirement home here in Taiwan is pretty amazing. In the meantime, I've got some music and cat dad responsibilities back east. I also have a coffee empire to start with at Dead Sled Coffee. I haven't completely relocated, but I do have my favorite coffee mug, a couple of guitars, a loaded yo-yo subway card here. I keep my camera, keys, and passport in my backpack, and that's all I need to hop back and forth. Fuck yes! Exclamation point. And he ended up by saying, oh, one last thing. Anyone who says sobriety is boring can suck it. You're just boring. I love that, man. Like, that, so sobriety aside, that really does sum up like the creative pursuit. Like, I've been DIY since a teenager. Even though I have 3 books out with major publishers, I still live like week to week financially. I'm not rolling in it. Like, I'm only as good as my next workshop or book or whatever the case may be. And that's been really tough for me because I don't like to market or promote myself. That feels counterintuitive to what I want to do. You know, growing up, cutting out, you know, the record sleeve for 7 inches my bands recorded or whatever. Like, yeah, I went on and signed to indie labels and bands, and it was nice to have them do that, you know, take care of that. And it's nice to have major publishers put out the book, so I write it and they take care of the distribution and stuff.
Yeah.
But I am still expected to market and stuff, and that feels icky to me. Like, I don't like that stuff. I get it, but I just don't like it. I know some people love it and thrive off of it, but it doesn't feel and flow with my creative process. So I tell my publishers, like, I get this is how it goes, and I'm going to do what I can do, but I'm going to do bare minimum as far as that stuff. It's not that I don't believe in my work, because obviously I do. It doesn't feel in alignment with my authentic and creative purpose. So
yeah.
That's just,
no, that's awesome. I'm glad you shared all that. It's
yeah, sorry, I'm tangenting today.
No, man, I love it. I'm always telling people that, like, the better, like, when I get into the right question and connect with people in what they're really passionate about, I just sit back, don't have to do anything, you know, because you're in that spot where you're really inspired to talk about those things, and that is what this show's all about, you know. And the more we ramble on with tangents to things that we connect in our minds and stuff, the better, in my opinion.
I dig it. I like that on my podcast too. It kills me when, and it doesn't happen often because I'm very similar to you. I might have like a couple questions just to like get the conversation started, but I want it to be organic too.
Mm-hmm.
But it kills me where there's sometimes people that come on, and I think I usually don't book people like this, but it has happened where they are very soundbiting, and they just, you know, like 1 or 2 sentences, and I get that. If you're on a quick 5-minute interview on the news or on a major radio show, I get it, but it's like now I give that, before we start, I'm like, look, get as deep as you want. We have 45 to 60 minutes. Like, I would rather like substance than, you know, short, quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Answers.
And I think it's really the best kind of way to approach topics like this for me, where it's like, I want to know your story, you know, we didn't get into your story very much, which we can definitely touch on. But that's
music, drugs, alcohol, near death, books. Here
we are. Here we are. I've heard your story a bunch of times. I've listened to your podcast a whole bunch, and you've had some great people on, and you know, you connect with your personal story and the guest story, and it always comes in together in a really nice way. And I think addiction and recovery is something that I have not addressed much on this. You know, it's not the focus of my show, but I think it's so deeply embedded with what we do. You know, musicians, artists, speakers, writers, like you said, some of your favorite writers, and mine too, are drug addicts, alcoholics, you know, whatever it is. And it's important to discuss those things. One, because you want to shed light on the fact that just because you have an addiction, you're not a terrible person, or that you're, you know, wasting your life. There's beautiful things that come out of such dark places. And one of my favorite topics is that, you know, using the darker places as fuel for inspiration and, you know, creativity. And a lot of times that stuff, you think it's so personal, it's so selfish almost to talk about, like, oh, it's my burden, my situation, but everyone has a way of connecting with those dark places. You know, they have their own spot. So when we share them creatively, artistically, it becomes this channel that is directly connecting, you know, and I love that. So maybe, you know, since I just brought it up, maybe you could fill people in on your story a little bit, if you're interested in that.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I love everything you had to say. Thank you for bringing that up. And you know, I feel super grateful for the fact that that I've had the experiences I have. Sure, there are some I wish I didn't have, more so because I've put friends and family, I never physically harmed them, I never like stole, but you know, I've put them through the ringer emotionally, and I'm sure mentally. So that kind of stuff, yeah, I wish I didn't put them through that, but in hindsight, I can find gratitude for the fact that today I can show up and help others, hopefully not put their loved ones through what I put mine through, or maybe not for as long as I did. And it's great, like, to me, that I can go and do workshops at, like, friggin' Cosm, the facility that Alex knows so great, the Visionaries run, and I've sat in, you know, in front of a group of, whatever, 7,500 people with them and talked about addiction, and here are two people that are big-time proponents of psychedelics, and I catch a lot of shit because I agree with them.
Yeah.
I think if the set and setting is right, it can be amazingly helpful for people, not only in their past, but there have been great studies done on the use of mushrooms in regards to quitting smoking, depression, addiction. Um, so, again, it's each individual is very different, but there's a big stigma in the 12 steps. Like, it's like, oh, any of that stuff is bad. And no, absolutely not. It might not be right for a lot, even maybe the majority of people in recovery, but if it can sincerely help someone, awesome. There are studies even with ketamine helping people bipolar and depression. And so anyways, getting to do that, or like I'm on the Be Here Now network, like you said, and I've kind of become like the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation's go-to guy when they get addiction stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Ram Dass is very well known, obviously, for psychedelics. And,
Yeah.
So, like, no, I can't find a redeeming value in things like heroin and cocaine, but like plant medicines, which is what I consider those, or like ayahuasca, is a totally different story. So, all that said, what was the question? My story, addiction,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, no, really, that nutshell version was like pretty normal childhood. Loved skateboarding from a very early age. From there, as a teenager, was into alternative music. Then met a friend who turned me on to punk and hardcore music. Absolutely fell in love with that, along with underground hip hop. Still skateboarding, playing in bands, straight edge. Around 16, got bored with that, so started to experiment like most people do, just like whatever alcohol we could get underage and pot. Quickly went from that to psychedelics, not using them in any kind of spiritual or healing context, just getting, messed up and watching David Lynch movies, like Mr. Bungle and, 9 Inch Nails and whatever. But it was like 19, I crossed that line I went from experimentation to regular use to abuse, and then you cross that line from abuse to addiction, and there's no going back. Like 1 in a million maybe, but I wasn't that, and I've tried numerous times. And that was kind of it. At 24, I ended up in my first detox. I had already been in psychiatric hospitals and many emergency rooms due to drinking to excess. There were a couple of suicide attempts in there. And from 24 for the next like 8 or so years, it was like get clean for a while, usually a year, a couple of years, end up relapsing back to an emergency room or a jail cell or a rehab, detox, whatever. It was back in like 2011. I hit a pretty low bottom and really started finally to take my recovery in my life seriously. I have not been sober since then. I had a couple more falls, but they were significantly less for the most part. That's where I really, even though I started embarking on the spiritual path back in like 2004, 2005, I started taking it really, really seriously back in like 2011. I had a meditation practice, but it's hard to go deep into that when you're only doing it for a year and then you end up like relapsing to alcohol and whatever else comes along with that. So yeah, and then first book came out in 2014 called Indie Spiritualist. It's a whole nother story how that happened. It's a semi-lengthy one, but it came out, like I said, I wasn't looking for to write a book, but somebody had read some stuff I was writing for a webpage about my own experience, introduced me to their literary agent, and a book deal was signed and came out in 2014. 2015, my second book came out, Everything Mind, and then 2018, just a few months ago, Dead Side on Living came out. And along with that first book and second one, the offer to speak at really incredible facilities and workshops. And, like I mentioned, Cosm, I've been blessed to speak at Wanderlust a number of times. I've been out in Hawaii at Ram Dass's conference. I spoke at Ken Wilber's Integral Conference in Colorado. Big time conferences all over the country, like the quote, like A-list spiritual teachers. Like, there have been times I've sat there on stage looking to my left and right in front of like 2,000 plus people on a panel and looking at these New York Times best-selling spiritual teachers who've been on Oprah and shit, and like, what the hell am I doing here? I'm still just, at heart, I still listen to punk and hardcore and skateboard, and I'm in a new band playing like really heavy music, like, because that's what I love, that's who I am. As we were talking about, like, going to get my neck tattooed next week because I don't have much property left on my body. And that's who I am. I love The Simpsons and stupid shit. Like, and yeah, I take spirituality seriously, but like I take being lighthearted and learning to laugh at myself, seriously. So it's weird to me still to this day that I'm considered a spiritual teacher or an author, because I don't see myself like that. I'll give my girlfriend more fuel for the fire. I am an experiencer. That's it, man. That's all I consider myself. Just like you are, through doing your podcast, or anyone that writes me a letter after they've read a book or seen an interview or listened to an interview I've done or come to a workshop. They are the same exact as me, an experience share. We all are. So I look at everyone I meet, as a guru to me. Life is the guru. We're all, it's the teacher. Bill Nye, the science guy, I love, he said, it's very simple. Everyone you meet, everyone knows something that you don't know. So are we listening? Or are we too busy, like lost in thought, or trying to get our points across, or talk? Yeah. Sure, that's me sometimes. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But I try to listen as much as I can. Life's a pretty incredible thing. It's tragic and terrifying and awful at times too. But for me, I'm grateful that I have this recovery path today, because I enjoy life a lot more. I'm really grateful for that. And I still have friends that, let me be clear, I'm not like one of those, like, if you do drugs or drink, you're not good. Because, no, I have a lot of friends that can still do that. And God bless them. They can. I can't. So, for whatever that's worth. So if anyone's listening, like, don't write me off just because I'm in recovery. I'm not that guy. I was just at a wedding, actually, with my girlfriend, and she has a beer once in a while. She's not an alcoholic. She can drink. But this guy asked her if she wanted a beer. And I was standing there, and she's like, no, I'm not drinking tonight. She just didn't feel like drinking. And he's like, oh, one of those, huh? And she's like, what? And he's like, what, are you going to take tallies of, like, everything I drink and monitor me? And she's like, huh? And I was like, see, that's what happens. I said that's right in front of him. He doesn't know that whether you're in recovery or not. And, and he ended up being a really nice guy, but that was the first thing he said. I'm like, this is what I deal with all the time. People that don't know I'm in recovery, that are just meeting me if it's a social thing. I don't care if someone else is drinking. Have fun. Or if you're smoking pot, whatever. Like, as long as you're not harming yourself, you're being safe, all good, man.
Yeah.
But that's the persona that, or the, people see that. Not everyone, but a lot of people just automatically like, oh, you're not drinking? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It's so crazy how society is just like that. But to each their own. So anyways.
For sure. And I like I said, that's really what I appreciate about your work the most. It's like, it's a personal journey. Everyone's got to go through what they got to go through, and you would not be where you are had it not been for your issues. I would not be where I am had it not been for what I had to go through. And also, by the way, I really love that we have a Bill Nye quote thrown in there.
There it is.
That's lovely.
Gotta love Bill Nye. Come on.
Yeah, it's great, man. But I want to, like, for the listeners, like, connecting these things it's really important for me to get these diverse voices, and it all comes back to creativity for me. Obviously, that's my focus, and that's I'm a musician, and that's what I've done for years, is take my experiences and channel them through art, through music, and share that with people. It's for a sense of connection, for a sense of understanding, and that's really where the spiritual work comes in too. It's not about the moments when you're beyond it all and you're blissed out, like those moments are great, but it's really about being in the heart of it, in the thick of it. And my spiritual work connects in the same way. It's like, I don't sit down to meditate and just like bliss out, and just sit there, no problem. Like, there's stuff that you have to go through. And when I feel like there's a really big shift happening in the spiritual community, perhaps for the first time, maybe it's just coming back in a real sense, where it's like, we're not just talking about the ultimate enlightenment. We're not just talking about, this one path or this one way. It's about life. It's about using what you have, where you are, with what you're doing, and being honest. Just 100%. And I give so much credit to anyone out there who's sharing their real self. There's so much fake people, so much fake, insanity in the world, where we're just using social media as a platform to glorify our lives, and most of us know that's not true, but it's still there. It's hard to see past it. And so with your writing and your podcast and the honesty through addiction and all that, it's a great thing that people can see. And I think writing, especially, writing books, it's huge. It's like you pick up a book, and whether you are you're meaning to or not, you're taking that information in, you're digesting it, just like listening to a good album or something. It becomes a part of you. And if you're just reading something that's just all love and light and easygoing, it gives you a really false perspective of what the spiritual path really is. And so it's.
Agreed, man.
I've been working on my own book for a while, like a personal memoir kind of thing. I spent a number of years hitchhiking around the country and living on the streets and doing all the dirty things involved, and that is really where the growth of my real spiritual work began.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I just want to say that I appreciate all that you have going on, and it's like I said, I tried to share that book with my buddy who's in jail. I think it would really be pertinent for his life. But well, we're getting down there towards the end here on the time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you have another interview you're doing today, right?
Busy man, yeah. One more, and then off to a meeting tonight for me, because I do meetings, and
oh yeah, cool.
But hell, man, I was just at Slayer the other night too, so gotta keep it real.
Nice. Well, if we could leave the listeners with something, I always like to get a little bit of advice, and it can come from whatever space in your background, but if you had one thing to share with people who are trying to become a writer, or who are either the artistic perspective or the spiritual perspective, I see it as the same thing. Like, to get where you are in your path, you've gone through a lot, and if there's one little nugget of wisdom you could share with people, what would that be?
Yeah, great question. I would say, whether you're writing a book or writing a song, whatever it may be, whatever your creative pursuit, your outlet is, approach it as if it were your last day on earth. Like, there's no tomorrow. What you are going to create today, whether it's what you're writing, the song you're writing, whatever, this is the last thing you're ever going to do. So, like, don't hold back. When I look at things like that, and I kind of go into that mindset, it helps, like, bring down that barrier. And along with that, it helps me to write more authentically. I'm writing for myself, yes, in the hopes that maybe it'll help benefit someone, whether it is a song on the guitar or actual words for a book or an article. But I don't ever want to write to sell myself or to promote myself. I want to write from my heart in the most authentic and raw way possible. And I think that is what really connects with readers or fans of music. Of course, sure, watered down, polished things do too, because that's what the masses in society, pushes on people. But once you start to unplug from that matrix and be like, man, there's so much more to life than what I'm being spoon-fed from popular society, that's where you start to find those things that go deeper. And that, to me, is where the true creativity lies. So yeah, that's it. Just, like, it's your last day on earth, and do it for yourself. Because if you're not doing it for yourself, to me, at least, people who have interest in real creativity, their bullshit detectors are finely tuned.
Yeah.
And they can tell from a mile away whether someone's really coming from their heart, or if they're coming to, make a New York Times bestseller list, or to get signed to, this record label or that, or whatever. So, yeah, that would be my 2 cents on that question.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. I think people, me as an artist, as a podcaster, all these things, it's like, the one thing I want to be sure to do is to be authentic, and like share, like, yes, I've learned a lot in my life, and yes, I've made mistakes, and I've done, things well, but at the core of that is who I am, beyond the success, beyond the failure, beneath the addictions, all those things. It's like, we are, we all are, and communicating that in an authentic way is my biggest mission. And that's, like I said, that's why I really appreciate your work, and hearing all the different platforms that you speak from, because you're always talking about skateboarding or music or addiction, or like, there's a lot of different sides that's coming from, and it
doesn't start or stop anywhere for me. Like, spirituality, it's all of it. Like, I write about everything in mine. Like, it doesn't stop when I walk out the door. It's always happening. So yeah, right. I appreciate you noticing that, because that's, like I said earlier, people tend to compartmentalize that part of their lives, but I think they're really doing themselves a disservice. You know, you bring that out with you into the world, and it just makes your experiences out there, whatever it may be, that much deeper and richer. So
totally, yeah, and it shines through, you know, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, you know, and I know you're modest, but you're at least a relatively successful writer and podcaster and all these things, and
tell that to my bills. I live a modest life, that's for sure.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that, man. That's great.
No, I'm a simple man. Simple.
Well, like I said, it shines through, and it's the kind of thing that will continue impacting people's lives, I think. And as a creative person, that is the mark of real success as an artist. You know, making something that is communicable, that people can understand and relate to. So I salute you for that.
And I salute you right back, man. Thank you so much for the work you're doing and showing up in the world and spreading the message, you know, in a way that's accessible for a lot of people who might not otherwise, you know, be ready for it or you know, we have this really cool thing where, you know, we're well, I was going to say younger, I just turned 40 on Sunday, so I'm no spring chicken, but I am relatively compared to most other teachers younger. And people like us that are younger and tattooed and whatever, like, can reach a different demographic that's looking for more, but the other popular stuff's not resonating. So thank you for what you're doing. I deeply bow to you for that, and I wish you continued success with your endeavors. And that book, that's great, man. Get it out there.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's really nice to connect with you. It's awesome to talk with people who are willing to just get out there, you know, just talk about it, just get real, you know, and not have any pretenses about it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, David.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for bearing with all the madness on my end. My daughter's sitting here handing me peanuts. Dude, you got a dog on the bed.
That's the authentic part of this. Like, whenever I do podcasts and stuff like that happens, people are like, oh, you can edit that out, right? I'm like, well, I can, but I'm not going to, because that's what just happened. So let's leave it in like that. I want to keep it really real, and when I say that, I mean it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm psyched your daughter talking. She's so cute.
Yeah, she's back again.
Hi.
Say hi.
Oh, she's shy.
Hardly ever. But at this moment, maybe. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me. And I will. Oh, one last thing. If you want to share your links or your website, you know, I'll have it all up posted on my show notes and stuff. But if there's anything you want to share about your new book, where they can get it, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, any of my stuff you can find on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever, in stores or online. But, yeah, if you want to connect with me, my website, theindiespiritualist.com, and, like, my Facebook and social medias are linked up there, and any events I have coming up, or you just click on that. So, thank you again for your time. This was a very refreshing, lovely conversation. I'm very grateful.
Great, man. I'm really glad that it's as beneficial for you as it is for me. It's very, like... I always get jazzed when I have these conversations. I walk away like, feeling ready to go. So
me too, man. They can be monotonous, a lot of the same questions, and I appreciate their interest. But yes, it's always nice to go more organic and just steer the way we went today. So this was very refreshing. I'm grateful.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time. Lessons in morning.